are listening to the Mountainside Podcast, and our guest for this episode is wildlife photographer Jason Loftus. He's also the co-host of the Wild and Exposed podcast. Jason is an incredible wildlife photographer. If you are not following his Instagram page, Untamed Images, you should be. If you don't have Instagram, I highly urge you to go check out Untamed Images. His work truly speaks for itself. He's captured some amazing animals in incredible settings. But above all that, Jason is a great guy. I thoroughly enjoyed his company tonight, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about photography, so it's going to be a good one. Jason, thanks for joining me tonight. This has been a long time coming. I'm really looking forward to sitting down and talking to you. I wish we were doing it in person, but we're going to do it remote, man, because it's been that long. So
it's really nice to see you. You know, I mean, we, like you said, we've been trying to connect for quite a while. I'm excited to chat with you, though. I mean, I just love chatting about all things photography, getting outside, hunting, whatever it might be, you know. So, yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah, we base a lot of the podcast around that, but it's more about showcasing individuals, too, that are doing extraordinary things, man. And that brings me right into your photos. They're incredible. I've been following you for some time. We've been going back and forth online well before I had the podcast, just talking about elk and all that sort of stuff. You know, I shoot a little bit too, and I wish I had the photo quality that you do. You're definitely a mentor to me in that space, and your photos speak for themselves. If anybody goes and checks out Untamed Images on Instagram or your website, man, just incredible stuff. I know you shoot some out here in Colorado, right?
I do. First of all, I just can't wash over that. First of all, thank you. I'm very humbled. That's some really kind words there, dude. I appreciate it. I don't look at myself as anybody other than just somebody that just enjoys it and has a passion for it and tries to get after it. But that means a lot. I appreciate it. So
absolutely.
But yeah, I kind of get all over the West, to be honest. You know, I get into Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho. You know, I spend time in a lot of the parks that, you know, a lot of us love, and a lot of public land, and out there just kind of, you know, whatever's available at the time to photograph. You know, so it takes me all over the place, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and getting to spend that time outside, like, you know, I'm a hunter and I'm an archery hunter and stuff, but I think more than anything, I enjoy being out with my camera just because there's some work involved, but not as much work involved. And to capture a still image of a bull while he's bugling and there's, you know, frost on him and steam coming out of his nose is just like one of the coolest things for me. But it's so funny when I am out with my camera and that sort of stuff and I'm taking photos, you know, you have a big bodied lens on there and a DSLR or something, people will stop and talk to you. And I'm sure that you found this like right in the middle of everything too. Like they'll pull up next to you. Hey, what are you shooting? You see that elk out there? Or, you know, and it's kind of funny. If I ever start to talk, I'm like, yeah, they're like, well, where can I see some of your photos? And I always pitch mine first, but I'm like, you got to check out this dude, Jason, man. He's awesome. So I always show him your Instagram page and yeah, good stuff.
Well, we need to get out and shoot together then, man. Seriously, let's make that happen.
I'd love to go into Rocky Mountain National Park with you or something at some point, you know, or any trip. Yeah. Honestly, man, I feel like there's a lot I could learn. Because I think it goes both
ways. Yeah, you know, there's nothing wrong with that either. In hobby mode, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I shy away from calling myself a professional because I do it for a hobby mostly, and I do it because it's my passion. And I've been fortunate to be recognized by some magazines and stuff, and that's all great. And it's a good goal to have. But really, I'm with you. The thing that drives me is just getting out there and having those experiences. And you know, you mentioned that you're an archery hunter, so am I. I've been an archery hunter my entire life, and that's really what got me into photography was hunting. Yeah. So, you know, just being out there and seeing all the cool stuff and having those experiences and wanting to share that with other people. And it's crazy to me how much that has turned me. You know, I still hunt. I still want to hunt. I still love to try to draw a good tag and go chase critters, even if it's over the counter, you know, general season, you know, archery stuff here in Utah. But I find myself wanting to spend more and more time with my camera, and I try to explain it to people. It's hard, right? Because it's like you get it because you've been doing it, but you get almost the same. It's not quite the same, but you get almost the same rush and adrenaline kick from capturing that image that you just, oh, that I nailed it. I got the one,
Yeah.
and it's an accomplishment, and it makes you feel like, okay, now I got to get this different image now. What's the next one on my list? So, and the cool thing is, hunting's, limits us to, maybe a couple months in the spring if you get into turkeys and stuff, and maybe, 2 or 3 months in the fall. But with a camera, you can, quote unquote, hunt year round, which is just, that's huge. I found that out, and my wife was like, she was kind of excited. You're going to get into photography. Well, you'll be hunting less, right? Yeah, probably will be hunting less, but
Yeah.
she didn't realize that photography is literally a year round endeavor. So,
Yeah, it's always the devil and the angel on the shoulders, It's like archery season, and then also it's right in the rut. So that's the prime time to be out with your camera too, It's like
yep.
it's so hard for me to balance, It's like, okay, I'm going to dedicate 7 days to archery, and then the rest of September is dedicated to photography as much as possible. So
Right, right. I do the same thing. I try to get out on the weekends during the archery general season. Maybe like you said, devote 2 or 3, 4 days of the week to that, and then the rest of the time is focused on photography. So and here in Utah, the archery season ends, middle of the month, and right before the middle of the month of September. So that's
okay.
right when the rut's are really heating up, generally. So it hasn't interfered too much.
Yeah, I always try to go the third week here in Colorado just because, they're more
Yeah.
spicy
Yeah,
then.
that's
So
definitely what I've found is that third week seems to be the best time to be out in the field for the best opportunities.
is the season in Salt or in Utah? Is that only 2 weeks long then? As far as archery, I've never
No, no,
hunted
no.
archery there.
Yeah, so it's literally it's about a month, just short of a month. It starts mid August and goes to mid September. There have been some changes this year, so I could be putting my foot in my mouth a little bit. There are some significant changes when it comes to the elk management plan in Utah this year. So don't take everything I'm saying to heart, right? It's listen to there was a podcast, eHunter podcast. They talked all about it. It's worth listening to that one because they talked to the DWR guy that was kind of over that plan and all the changes. But regardless, it's roughly the archery season is generally about that month period, and I think they actually extended the archery season a little bit into the rut period. So I think this year the archery elk hunt might end around the 20th or the 21st or something like that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes here in Colorado this year too. So if you're coming back to get an over the counter tag, definitely check game units, and they've restructured it, especially with the wolf. They got to drop some wolves in here pretty soon. So, and we have
yeah,
some here already. So I think that
yeah,
that's going to change things a little bit too.
that's an interesting conversation in of itself. So
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations on that, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's I don't know. I have mixed emotions about it, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah, we've spent so
To
much
me,
time on it. I don't want to waste our
you don't
time
want to
on
even
it if
waste
you're
our
all
time
right.
on it. Exactly. Nope, that's exactly what I was going to say. To me, it's
Yeah.
just it is everybody's been talking about it.
It's
So
like that and the COVID conversations, right? Like
yeah,
everybody's
right.
heard it. Like, oh yeah, this happened to me during the pandemic, and it's hard not to bring it up. It's like
Yeah.
because it is pretty
Well, it's
current.
been a chunk of our life for the last 2, 3 years.
Oh,
So
I know,
yeah.
yeah, and it's changed a
So
lot. I mean, honestly, we probably wouldn't have the success that we have had with the podcast if it wasn't for the pandemic. Because
right.
my background is live entertainment and rock and roll production and that sort of thing, and shooting in some of those spaces, and that just came to a complete halt. So it was like, okay, this is something that
Yeah.
I had set up prior to that, and I'm glad that I did it because it kept me occupied. I'm a guy that likes to have something to do. So it's been
Yeah.
awesome, and it's been good to connect with people like you and so many others, that everybody that we've had on, from fighters to professional skiers. We've had a ton of photographers on as well. So it's kind of my own greed to pick their brains.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you guys are doing a really good job. I've listened to quite a few of them, and some of the that's the fun thing too is like we do the Wild and Exposed podcast too, and we've been doing that for 5 years now, and it's a slog sometimes, but the cool thing about it is it's so fun to talk to people and hear their story and hear where they come from, how they got into it, and it's just you learn something from everybody. I mean, if you have the right mindset and right attitude in life, you can learn something from everybody, and it may not be the right thing to do, it may be something to avoid, right? But if you have the right attitude,
100%.
you can learn something from everybody. And I think that's something that a lot of people tend to forget sometimes. But
Yeah, and I would say that podcasting has made me a better at learning from those people, cuz you really, when you go back and you listen to yourself or whatever, you're like, God, I sound, you just pick yourself apart. And
mhm,
then, try not to interrupt somebody. Like when I first started this, I would interrupt people left and right because I wanted to get out what was ever in my mind. It's like just listening to somebody when you're having a conversation is like, that's a battle in itself, right? And that
absolutely.
has really made me understand people more, I think, you know, over 100 episodes or whatever I've been in here. And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but but yeah, no, I enjoy learning from people, and this has really made me listen to their experiences and get to know some people. And we talked about it this a couple episodes back. It's also an awesome way to have an uninterrupted conversation. As long as you got a good internet connection or whatever. If you're sitting here in person, it's pretty awesome because I think in this day and age, you're always connected to some sort of device or electronic or some sort of distraction, whether you're, in a public space or not.
Right.
There's always some sort of stimulus.
Yeah, I've learned a lot doing the podcast too. I mean, like you said, just becoming a better communicator and learning. So many people think that a better communicator is somebody that can speak well and uses words wisely and has a good cadence and avoids the ums and the uhs and the whatever, right? But to me, the real secret of being a good communicator is, like you mentioned, just learning how to listen. Learning how to hear what somebody's saying and learning how to probe and ask the right questions. To keep the conversation interesting. But
Absolutely. So tell me more about your podcast. I've been fortunate. I've been listening to you guys since you started. I don't get in every episode because I'm busy and there's so many podcasts these days.
yep,
But what I have listened to has been awesome. It's you and you're the co-host. There's
yep.
several hosts, right? That kind of
Yeah,
bounce
it's
back
been
and forth.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no worries.
It's been interesting. It's kind of morphed over the years, but it started out with Ron Hayes, Mike Morrow, and Mark Raycroft, and they went for about 2 years together doing their thing, and then Mark decided to leave the podcast for personal reasons, and so they brought me in, and I've been doing it for going on 3 years now, I guess. And then we've actually had a couple, like Drew Hamilton is now a co-host as well. And then we've added a producer. His name's Brandon Day, and so we just keep kind of growing the team. Not all of us can be on at the same time, which is good because it'd be a little hectic sometimes when we're all on. But yeah, it's just really about trying to. We've been talking about right now. We do a weekly podcast, which has been really difficult, and we've been able to, for the most part, maintain that for the 5 years. I think you'll see a lot of other podcasts they'll do a monthly or they'll do every other week, and so we're kind of considering maybe backing off a little bit, tailing off on that, just because it's so demanding, and as you know, it takes so much time to, if you're going to prep properly and be able to have a good conversation with somebody, you kind of need to know a little background about them. You need to do a little bit of homework and research, and so you can have a good conversation with them. But yeah, it's just about guys out in the for the whole idea behind the podcast was, you get done shooting and you're with your buds and you kind of go back and you're like, wow, that was so cool. What about this? What, yeah, did you get that shot? Whatever. And so the brainchild for Mike was, why don't we just start recording that and just make it a podcast, right? So then it
Yeah.
kind of just more from there, right? So we do a lot of that, like we're just kind of get it together and BS and catch up and talk about what we've been out photographing and stuff and what we've learned and new gear and whatever. And then we also have guests on quite a bit and talk to other photographers and hear their story and hear about where they came from, how they started, and talk about their work and stuff. So it's been a fun journey.
I've really enjoyed listening to it. I mean, I've gotten some pro tips. I feel like I'm listening to some pros, in it. And then it's not all just cut and dry like camera settings and all this. You guys kind of banter a little bit. There's some humor involved, and
Yeah.
you tend to always have a guest too, and they're incredible. I've learned, or I've discovered so many more people in the photography world because of you guys that I'm just like, man, these guys are amazing. So
Yeah, it's insane to me how many amazing photographers are out there. I'm constantly blown away, and it's good too because it raises the bar for me too, right? I mean, I might
sure.
think I've kind of reach some level, and it's like then you see some other photographers that are like, oh my gosh, that guy, holy cow.
Right.
I'm never gonna get there, and I hope I never do, right? Whatever that there means. But to me, it's all about the journey. We try to tell people all the time, we're all at just different levels or different stages of this photography journey, and it's a learning process, and it's about how much time you can spend doing it, and doing it is the learning. It really is. So
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think it even goes beyond the camera, right? Like once you get into some of these editing programs, you can get as crazy as you want.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I try to stick just to Lightroom because I'm familiar with it and know how to screw around in it a little bit. But a lot of that stuff can happen in post, and some people kind of they kind of put their own flavor on it at that point, right?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I think that's where most of the flavor comes from anymore is in the post processing. There's gear can get you some of that if you buy a really good prime lens. It gets you like a 400 millimeter 2.8, gives you all that creamy bokeh, and you're shooting wide open, and that can help. But nowadays, like you said, you can create that same effect in post. It just takes a little bit more time to edit. But once you have those skills, you can make it almost anything out of any image. Not all the time, but most of the time. There's a point where it starts to look over edited, in my opinion, and there's some people out there that definitely, I wouldn't call it over edit. That's not a fair term. They just edit a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a style. It's an art. Do your thing. For me, the big thing is really try just being true about it. If you're creating composites, or if you're really editing and you're adding things to images that weren't there, just be real
Right.
about it. Just say that, and then everybody can respect it, and it'll still be the same thing. But people that try to do things like, adding things to images that weren't there, and they create this composite style image and then pretend like it's real. I lose a lot of respect for folks like that. I just take a lot of pride in your integrity, and are you a photojournalist or are you an artist? If you're a photojournalist, you don't really do hardly anything to the image. If you're an artist, then the sky's the limit. So
Right.
it's really fun. It can be really fun, and there's so much to learn on the post processing side. I mean, the sky's the limit, and the tools are getting more and more powerful too, making it easier and easier for anybody to do it. So
I struggle with, sitting behind the computer for that long. I don't like it. I'd rather be out shooting, and
yep.
I came kind of from the film era, like the first real camera that I had, I think it was like a Fuji hand-me-down from one of my uncles, and I took a photography class in middle school or junior high is what it used to be. And, did the whole dark room and all that sort of stuff, and kind of learned composure from them, and, the different general rules like rule of thirds and just all that different composition. And then, shooting on film, you only had so many shots and stuff. So I've kind of taken the DSLR back to that for me because I just get more enjoyment out of it. It's more of a challenge, I guess, to like, oh shit, there's a power pole right there, like let me see if I can get a different angle or whatever it is, especially when you're dealing with wildlife, you got to kind of anticipate it a little bit. Do you kind of find that I think hunting, and growing up around these animals and hunting these animals, I think has really helped me in the photography sense is like just understanding animal behavior and being able to anticipate where they're going to go, where they might come out, what's going on in the environment. Is there another bull bugling across this ridge or whatever's going on? Do you kind of find that with capturing some of your stuff? And
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. I mean, it's one of those things that I feel like at first it made me a better wildlife photographer because I understood animal behavior to a degree. But then what I found is I thought I understood animal behavior, but the more time I spent in the field with animals, like elk, for example, and I spent way more time, not just in hunting season, but all year round with those animals, it was incredible to me how much more I learned about animal behavior. And I feel like that made me, I wouldn't say it made me a better hunter because that's not fair. It's not like I'm out there, stacking up elk every year like I'd like
yeah,
to be. But it definitely made me have a better respect for, the animal themselves and the amount of interaction they have year round and the amount of herd dynamics there are and kind of what they're doing when they're doing certain things and why are they doing that, and just understand that. I mean, I've talked about it before on other podcasts, but I mean I've had the benefit of watching firsthand, right there in my face, a cow bugle. for example,
Really?
and I've seen that multiple times, and people talk about it. I've tried to catch it on video multiple times, just never been able to. But it's crazy. It's literally that first part of the bugle without the chuckle, and I've heard a cow do it multiple times. I've heard bulls, mew like a cow. I mean, they just
Yeah.
the amount of verbal communication that these animals have is incredible. And just all the different things and what does it mean and how are they doing? Why are they doing it? The cow and estrus call that we've all heard about, where they get real super whiny, and I've heard that multiple times now in the field during the rut, and doing photography and being in places where they're not necessarily hunted. You get a chance to really see what the rut's really all about too. And I've had the opportunity to stand in the middle of multiple rut balls, what I'd call them, and where there's 5 or 6 bulls that are all like herd style bulls that are just going at it and trying to figure out what the cows, trying to gain dominance over the cows so they can breed them. And then you've got all these satellite bulls that are sneaking in and breeding cows when the bulls are fighting, and it's just crazy. It's crazy and it's pandemonium, but it's such an amazing thing to witness and experience. So yeah, I think it has made me it benefited me up front as a photographer, but then I feel like it made me a better photographer and a better hunter overall, just because of the time in the field I spend with the animals. But
Yeah, I've never really thought about it the other way, but I guess that makes a lot of sense, you know? I mean,
yeah.
it's so weird where I'm at. We're in Evergreen, Colorado. The
Hmm.
studio's right on Main Street. I don't know. I don't think you've been here yet, have you? I know we've went back
No.
and forth about trying to get you up here, but you
Yeah.
definitely need to come in September or October because
Yeah,
we
I'm
have,
down.
some 300-400 class bulls running around. And the hard part here is because there's so many subdivisions and, so many houses and stuff, it's trying to capture that image where there's nothing behind them, like a car or a road or a sidewalk or a whatever. But that, it's pretty amazing because you don't really see the bulls all year round here until maybe 2 days before archery season starts. And they move right in. We have a golf course that runs right along a lake. It's the perfect habitat for them. And the same bull I've shot for 7 years with my camera keeps coming back, and each year he's a little bit different. And then some of the local photographers, we've named them and all that sort of thing. So we can know we're all up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. or whatever, driving around
Hmm.
trying to find the different herds and stuff that are around here. But it is
Yeah.
it's really cool to see him in that environment and that close. So I totally understand what you're saying. Like a lot of these places where you go in and shoot, like maybe Rocky Mountain National Park or something like that, they don't
Hmm.
have that hunting pressure. So you can really experience what the animals are like. Because I know, for example, going out and hunting here in Colorado, there's been such an increase in frequency of the amount of people that they see, whether they're recreating in the summer or they're getting chased by bow hunters, that the elk just shut up. And I mean, they don't even bugle in some of these spots. You get on the
Right. Right.
front
Well.
range side of the divide, and if it's not on private property, they're not bugling.
Right. Well, and just wait till the wolves come, right? Because that will
Yeah.
change that even more significantly, where they won't be talking near as much as soon as they get trained. You see that with the Yellowstone elk quite a bit, and you see that with the elk in the Idaho and Wyoming areas where they've gotten the wolves that become pretty prevalent. They've learned to adjust to survive, right? And so you don't hear near the amount of bugling and things that you may have in the past. But yeah, yeah, it's all those things are that affect the dynamics of their behaviors and how they um, how they communicate. And when you're in an area where there's no pressure and you don't have those things, then you get to see that natural behavior, which is cool. So
Yeah, no, it's I really enjoy it, and I hope that it doesn't change too much here. Just because I've grown up around it, it's like one of those things. In the middle of the night, you wake up and it sounds like Jurassic Park outside your bedroom window. Like it's
hmm.
pretty special. So I hope
Yeah,
that doesn't change too much.
yeah.
Um, I guess I want to dive into heavily. I want to dive into some of the photos and some of the stuff that you've been able to do and some of the trips that you've been on. I think I just saw a post with a snow leopard or something. Where you caught a snow leopard or something
Oh
on
no.
camera or no?
No, no, I wish I that's on the list for sure. I've never
Yeah,
been able to get over there to do that. kind of tentatively set up with a guy that does that. It's the it's a whole ordeal. You got it's all about how much time you can spend in the field over there, and you got to do it and get wild snow leopards. It's not a simple thing. It's not an easy thing. But snow leopards are incredible. They're high on the list for me. But I there's all the animals. That's the other thing that's blown my mind is being in photography. Is I mean, I've always had an appreciation for animals in general. I've always loved animals, but for me, because of my hunting background, I was really always focused on like waterfowl, big game like deer, elk, and stuff like that. That I was spending time chasing with my bows and shotguns and stuff. But with this photography thing, every time I photograph a new animal, I just get another appreciation for them, and it forces me to want to learn more about them and dive in and learn their behaviors and why they do that thing that I just photographed. What was that all about? What is that? Are they communicating? Are they posturing? What are they doing? It's cool to learn so much more about all these different animals, and there's so many animals on the planet that we could be out there trying to chase around and photograph. So, I recently went to Africa and was able to check that off the list, so to speak. But all that did is just drive me now to want to be out in Africa every year if I can, because it was incredible. And there's something about being around all those animals that not only can but do eat people every year. It's different here in the United States. We have predators for sure. We have the grizzly bears, we have the mountain lions, and the black bears that they do attack people, they do kill people, but for the most part, most people will have an encounter with those critters and not a single problem. And over there in Africa, if you're out on your own running around and you come across a lion and you don't have a weapon, you're probably going to get eaten. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, I mean, it's just pretty wild to be in that environment and to be around all those predators that regularly do take humans, and to be so close to them and to be able to photograph them and their behaviors, and to be be able to do it in a safe way is just incredible to me. And there's opportunity every time you turn around. There's opportunity. But I've spent a lot of time around black bears and here in the states, and never gotten a wild cougar yet. That's high on the list too. But black bears, grizzly bears, all those other predators are amazing to spend time around. And the thing you learn about them is you learn how to behave around them, so that you don't put yourself in a situation where you're at danger and at risk, right? And I think that's what a lot of people. My whole personality, or my whole mentality about predators has changed. It used to be, as a hunter, predators are bad, get rid of all the predators, right? But as I've learned to be more of a conservationist and more of a photographer and a hunter, I've learned that there's definitely a place for those critters on the landscape, and they're amazing and they serve a purpose. They just got to be managed, in my opinion, like everything else, just because we don't live in a utopia anymore where they can just be left to their own accord. Could they live and survive? Yeah, probably. But what happens when a wolf pack is left to their own design is they basically will eat themselves out of house and home, and then they end up killing each other too. And then you have these big swings and cycles and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
anyways, not to go down that rabbit hole too far, but it's just,
I couldn't agree more with you on that. It was well said, and I have a mad appreciation for them too, man. Like catching one of them in the wild is so much more rare than catching a mule deer or elk or something like that, So it's a pretty special moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm getting ready to go to Oslo, Norway, to
Really?
Svalbard actually. Yeah, to try this year. I'm going in May actually to go focus on polar bears, and that's what I guess I'm saying, between the podcast and this photography thing. It's really just opened a ton of doors for me to be able to really go out and chase some amazing bucket list items that I would have never thought I'd be doing in my lifetime. To be honest, I've always, I mean, I never had a desire to go photograph polar bears before, until I got real serious into photography. But the cool thing is not only do you get to photograph them, you get to have that experience, that opportunity to see them and to watch them and to learn about them, like I've just been saying. So sky's the limit. I mean, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Wherever you go, there's something to photograph for the most part. So
Yeah, that's incredible. Have you been to Norway before?
never have. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
It is one special spot, man. I've been fortunate with some of the bands I toured with. We would do some festivals there and stuff in the summer, and it's a cool spot, man. I mean, just landscape wise, I have some beautiful landscape photos. I got super into doing like some World War II history photos and stuff back in the day.
Oh yeah, way cool.
And
Yeah.
there's so much history there. It's a very special space, man. One thing that I've kind of started doing, and maybe it's just because I'm not as confident in my photography skills sometimes, is just taking in the moment every once in a while and like not being so focused on taking a killer photo, because my biggest problem is time and then going back through those photos and trying to edit. And I'm not a rapid shooter or anything like that. I'm a kind of like a one click guy, at a time. But yeah, do you ever find yourself doing that where it's like, man, I'm just going to soak in the moment and not worry about getting the shot? Or in the position you're in, is there any pressure, like because they're sponsors or maybe a magazine's, hired you as a contract to get published or whatever that is do you ever find yourself kind of like, God, this is stressful? Or
I've been able to avoid the stressful part of it. I think any stress that a photographer has, if you're not, unless you're on assignment, then it's a little different. But in general, you're just out there trying to capture whatever you can capture, and a lot of times you have an image in your mind that you want to capture, and it might be that I'm really trying to get the cover of this magazine, and so I know what they're looking for, and I really want to try to make that happen. So you try to put yourself in the right position to get that image. But in general, no, I do find myself. No, I don't feel the pressure so much. The pressure that I do feel is of my own accord. But I will say that I absolutely, the more I do this, the more I go, okay, I've got the images I need. I am going to just kind of sit back and enjoy this and soak it in. As a matter of fact, in most of those rut balls that I've experienced, I'm not doing much photographing because most of the time it's so chaotic you can't really focus on anything to photograph anyways. And I'll be honest, it's just way more incredible to just sit back and watch it all
so
happen.
much fun.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
And you
So,
got to kind of watch your back. There's been a few times where I've been
oh,
shooting a bull or something. Next thing I know, there's, another 6x6 behind me that I had never seen
absolutely.
before. And I'm like, oh shit. Now I'm in between them. So
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some downsides to shooting in places like that where they don't get pressure too, because they're not. I mean, elk aren't generally very aggressive to people, but they can be and they do.
yeah.
And you got to be real careful. You can put yourself in a situation where you could get attacked and gored. And when you hear about elk attacking people, it's never in the wild. It's always in a place like Rocky Mountain or Estes Park or
Yep.
somewhere like that, right? So
Well, and I mean, people can be stupid. I'm just gonna say it out loud, man. People can be
yep,
really stupid. Because I'm out there with my 3 to 500 lens, and giving those animals some space so they can naturally move into wherever they want to go. And it's crazy, man. You'll see somebody pull up in their car, pull off or block a road, get out with their cell phone and walk right up to a bull like it's
I
not going
know.
to do anything. And I've seen a
That's
couple
incredible.
people get chased either around the car. I've seen one person actually wasn't bad. I wouldn't call it gored, but got ran over pretty good.
Right. Well,
And
there's been a few times over the last 5 6 years where I think a couple of people actually got gored and killed over at Rocky Mountain. And I mean, the point I'm making is it does happen. You just got to be smart. And I've been charged by bulls. I'm being real. I've been charged by bulls more than once. And a lot of times, am I pushing the envelope? I'm well within the rules of the park, but you got to pay attention to their behaviors. And they are all frustrated and rutted up and aggressive. And all they're trying to do is show you that they're the man so that you don't mess with their cows. And sometimes, most of the time, I think they keep us separate from the other elk, but sometimes I think they just get so frustrated and so in the moment that they tend to forget sometimes. And that's when the situations get weird. I had a situation a couple years ago with that famous bull over there, Bruno. He I was about 100 yards away from the herd. I was sitting on a rock minding my business. And I've spent enough time with elk to know that when a bull starts to kind of run away from the herd, he's generally going to, like, there's another bull coming in or something that he's trying to chase off. And I'm sitting on this rock 100 yards away, middle of the day, no shots to be had, just kind of wait until the light gets right and whatever. And literally 100 yards away, and this bull starts running towards me, and I'm kind of like looking around. I'm like, what's going on? I'm looking at they're in a satellite bull coming in or something. Nothing behind me, nothing going on. And I'm like, it starts to kind of, this all happened pretty quick, but it starts to kind of dawn on me, like, wait a minute, he's looking at me. And I kind of look at him, and he's like, and I realize, oh, crap, he's coming at me. So I get up off the rock and I'm like, geez, man. So I start kind of like running up the hill and get up behind a tree. And he literally comes right up close to me and like, puts his head down and like at me and then turns around
Wow.
and walks back to his herd. And I'm just like, what the hell was that all about? You know what I mean? I was
Not
minding my
today,
business,
Jason.
dude. Yeah, exactly. It's like, geez, all right, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. I'll stay away. But yeah, so those kind of moments are fun and exciting too. But if I'd have just been snoozing, not paying attention, sitting on that rock, who knows what would have happened. So
Yeah, definitely when I'm out shooting, I always try to have like some sort of shield, right? Whether it's a pickup,
yep,
another car, and an
yep,
exit plan because like some of
yep.
these things there's this elevated like the elk love being down around the lake right here in town, and there's
Hmm.
all these cattails, and it's kind of a marshy area, and they love being in there, especially in that time of year. And there's a elevated wooden walkway there, and you can just
Hmm.
find yourself trapped. It is a really bad spot to be because unless you're jumping out and getting muddy and your gear muddy, you can get trapped on that little bridge pretty good and have them coming both ways. But
Yeah, I've had just a thought real quick about like you remember they used to do the Darwin Awards.
mhm.
Do you remember that? And you used to get emails, right? It was an email thing. You'd get this email about the Darwin Awards, and it was always like some stupid people doing stupid crap that ends up either getting them killed or hurt pretty bad. And I really just think like this is sounds so bad, but I just get so frustrated with how stupid people are
Yeah,
that I really just think you let Darwinism do its thing. These people that are out there doing those things, trying to get a selfie with the big bull elk and when in the middle of the rut, and they get too close. I mean, a little of this is like let nature take its course. These
right.
people are that dumb. You got the Taurons in Yellowstone that
Yeah,
freaking
I
are
was
always
just gonna
getting
bring that
attacked
up.
by the
That's like one of
bison
my
and
favorite Instagram pages for sure.
yep.
And
It
it
sounds
never
heartless, but
surprises me, you know?
right.
It's
No,
like,
no.
yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
you've
we always
spent a
joke,
lot
it's
of
like
time in the
bison. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. You've spent a lot of time in Yellowstone, haven't you? I mean, it was cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna plan a trip up there. I was planning a photography trip, and I actually reached
Uh-huh.
out to you, and this is, you know, where we first kind of started talking, man. And you turned me on to some awesome spots. You were so gracious with it. Like, I really appreciate that, man. So I don't think I've had a
Yeah.
chance to thank you, but yeah.
No, absolutely, man. I'm glad it worked out for you. To me, it's like this thing can be super competitive, and it is very competitive for those guys, the professionals and the folks that are trying to be published in that. But at the same time, it's not why I'm doing it. I mean, I'm doing it. Yes, it's nice. It's not how I make my living. So for me to be able to, help somebody else out and help them either teach them something or, show them a place to go. I'm just an advertisement. I'm not going to tell everybody all my spots. Just
A
let's get
hundred
that out
percent,
right now.
yeah.
But,
Same
but
rules apply as hunting, right? Like it's not,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
right. But Yellowstone's a national park. I mean, if somebody wants to go there and have some fun and photograph some stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's areas to focus in for sure. And if you want bears, then there's a better time of the year to go and areas to focus on. If you want elk, then there's a better time of the year to go and a better places to focus on. So I've been fortunate to learn those things and those tricks and the times of the year to go to the right places over the years. And those kind of public places, I'm absolutely willing to help somebody out for sure. So
yeah. That's super cool. You were very gracious with it. So thank you again.
yeah, for sure.
Spending your time in some of these spots, I mean, how much do you dedicate? How much time do you think to being outside and shooting? Because I mean, it really shows on your page. You have just some incredible stuff, and I know how much time it takes for me to capture something, and especially on these
Yeah,
trips, you might go out for a day and see absolutely nothing.
absolutely.
Especially if you're trying to shoot wolves or anything like that. Like, good luck.
Right. Yeah, I was just on a Yellowstone. We led a tour, helped lead a tour on a private coaches in out of West Yellowstone, and just this last weekend. And two of the days were pretty good, and then one day was just pretty much a bust. And actually, to have 2 days out of three is really good. More than likely, you'll be lucky if you get one really good day, and then two okay days. So to your point, that's 100% valid. But spending it's all about putting time in the field for sure. That's what's going to give you the best opportunities to capture the images you want. And it's hard because it's a balancing act, right? Every year I'm fortunate. I work for a Fortune 250 company that I have lots of benefits. I've been there a long time. I get a lot of vacation time. So, I use my time accordingly. I try to spend as much time as I can out photographing wildlife. And a lot of times I'm able to do, 2, 3 day weekends and get what I need. Other times I'm devoting a week at a time or 10 days at a time to trying to get out and do that stuff, right? So, if somebody's really wanting to do it, it's really is about, we mentioned earlier, spending time doing the photography thing, spending the time with the animals you want to learn with, learn about, and then just out there doing it and learning how to how to work your camera and how to do the post processing stuff. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there to do all that stuff. There's plenty of YouTube videos that'll tell you how to set your camera up. I mean, there's no reason that somebody can't get into this thing nowadays, and especially with the new technology and these mirrorless cameras and stuff. It's
Yeah, it's pretty
basically
wild.
shoot in auto mode, right? I mean, it's almost cheating anymore. It really is. But which is good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I act like I'm the guy that was shooting film, and I never was, right? I came in the DSLR phase, which was even crazier than the film days, right? I had,
Hmm.
memories cheap. I can take 100,000 photos, and that didn't cost me anything other than my time to go through them. So I'm not trying to say that just the newer mirrorless stuff is, the only advantage as of late, but with that mirrorless technology, you can see exactly what your exposure looks like on the camera real time, which is before you had to really understand the exposure triangle to be able to expose things properly and to know what you're trying to capture and to know what you're trying to do creatively, with your camera.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to me, I spend as much time as I can. I mean, it's hard to put a number to it. I will say it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time in the field. It's a lot of weekends. It's a lot of nights after work. It's a lot of weeks at a time during the elk and the deer rut. It'd be hard to put a number to, but I also have, I'm a grandpa. I'm an empty nester now. My youngest son is out on a mission for our church, and so my wife and I are empty nesters, and we have grandkids that we just love spending time with, and I try to balance that with spending time with my family and spending time with those grandkids and doing trips with my family too that aren't I got to be careful. I got to put the camera
Right.
down once in a while and just spend and be with my family. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I've learned to be somewhat successful at that too. So
Yeah, no, it's definitely a balancing act, and that's awesome that you get to spend that amount of time. I I thought that this was a full time gig for you with the quality of your stuff and just how much time that I know that you put into it. So I know you might as well have two full time jobs.
yeah, well, with the podcast too, I'd say it's pretty
Yeah.
close to two full-time jobs. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
man, you're crushing it. Keep it up, dude. I love it.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
What are you shooting on these days? Have you made the jump to Sony, or are you Nikon guy? I know. One of the things I got to bring up too, before I forget, I
Uh-huh.
think one of the coolest things that you do on Instagram, that you started doing in the last couple years or so, is you'll actually put your camera settings behind whatever incredible photo that you've taken, and it'll tell you, the aperture, the f-stop, all that sort of stuff that you were shooting at, the camera settings, shutter speed, all that sort of stuff, which is super cool. And it's helped me in some things. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad it helps. I get a lot of feedback from folks. A lot of people just comment and say, "Hey, I really appreciate sharing that information." And to me, it's funny because I think once you get to a certain, and I don't mean this bad in any way, shape, or form, but once you get to kind of a certain point in your journey, you really don't need that. You kind of understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to capture. So you understand that exposure triangle, and you know that, hey, if I'm trying to get blurry stuff, I need to be at like 1/60th of a second, and that means I'm gonna need to keep my light down because it's bright outside, so I need to crank my aperture up, and I need to have my ISO all the way to the bottom, or I mean, you just kind of
Yeah.
know if you've done it enough, you got what am I trying to capture, and I have a rough idea of what my settings are going to need to be before I even pick up my camera. But I know for people that are learning it, it's a big deal because it gets them. They're not thinking that way. They're thinking, okay, how did he create that image? And so you see the details. But what's funny is there's a lot of ways that I could have done that image. I could have had my aperture different and my shutter speed slower and my ISO higher or whatever. But that just is what I chose for the situation. So it's not like I'm giving away any secrets or anything, right? It's
Right.
just but a lot of people do say that it's helpful for them. So to me, it's like if it's helpful for people, then why not? I'll throw it out there. It's not a big deal for me. So
No, it's cool. I think from a geek side of me, I enjoy looking at that and like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of
right,
sense. Or what it's I'm always a guy that I'm too worried about blurring out antlers or something like that. So I tend to shoot a little higher on the f-stop, and it's like I could
That's
go
smart.
lower because look at what Jason just got.
Well, that's smart. You know, it's funny. One of my mentors, I've talked about him a lot. He probably would be mad if I keep bringing him up. But Harlan Cooper, who's another just incredible wildlife photographer, he's kind of a mentor to me, and he's taught me a lot of really. He's probably taught me some of the most or the most key tricks, if you will, the key ways to think about things that have really helped me become the photographer I am today. And I mean, there's a lot of people that have been a part of my journey and have contributed to my success for sure. And I give all those people credit. But the couple things that Harlan always taught me, really helped me become who I am. And I think it's important to have a mentor too. That's one thing I was going to bring up. Is if you're getting to this and you're serious about photography, I would find a mentor, somebody that you can bounce ideas off. There's somebody that'll tell you the truth,
Yeah.
and you gotta have thick skin. I've sent stuff to Harlan before and said, "Oh, dude, I think this is killer," and he's like, "Nope," and I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" And he'll tell me, "Well, you got that stick, and look at it's coming out of the back of its head in the background. It's not going to work." And I'll fight it and fight. I'm like, "Gosh, dang it, you're right. It's just not the image, And so you have that. If you have that, then that helps you become a better photographer a lot faster, I think.
And how did you end up meeting Harlan, and how did you make that connection? Was it something where you just reached out to him or happened to
No,
run
it's
into him?
fun. It's a funny story. I've been following him on Facebook for quite a while and loved his work. And we were at the Hunt Expo here in Utah years ago. It's probably been 8 years ago now. And he just come up and introduced himself to me. And I think because he'd been seeing some of my stuff I'd been kind of doing back then, and it was all rookie, just new. But for whatever reason, he was another photographer in the area that he maybe could potentially go shoot with or whatever. Introduced himself, and I was kind of. It sounds funny. I was kind of fangirling. I mean, I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Harlan Cooper, dude! I've been following your stuff forever, man. It's incredible."
Like I'm
You
doing
know,
with
and
you right now, right?
right, right, yeah. But yeah, so we just kind of hit it off and stayed in touch, and then kept communicating back and forth, and it just kind of built into the friendship. And then we started shooting together a little bit, which he's pretty. He doesn't like shooting with a lot of people. He's pretty keeps a lot of things close to the vest, and like I said, he's taught me so many things just about how to think about exposure and how to do certain things. And one of the things, I guess this takes me back. I'm glad I did this because my mind went off a little bit. But what I was leaning towards is he always talks about shooting at a higher aperture. I mean, I don't
Okay.
think he shoots anything less than f8. And he
Really?
tells me all the time, he's like, Jason, you got to shoot higher aperture, shoot higher aperture, shoot higher aperture. And I still end up shooting wide open a lot because I want to get the, as much light as I can or whatever, right? So, so it's funny that you said that about tend to shoot a higher. That's smart. It's really smart to do. But there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? You can shoot a higher aperture, or you can move back a little bit too, right? And if you move back, your focal plane changes and gets wider. So the further you are away from from your subject, the bigger your aperture gets as well, without changing your aperture. So there's ways that there's an app out there called Photo Pills, and for somebody that really wants to try to make sure, like for example, you take a photo of a bull, if you're right in their face, and you're at point blank and you're full frame with, you're not getting all their antlers in with a 600 millimeter at f4, you're absolutely going to have parts of the face and parts of the antlers that are not in focus.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to know, like, if you're going to do that and you want as much in focus as possible, what do you have to do? Well, there's these apps out there called Photo Pills is the best one in my opinion, but you can actually calculate. It's math. How close are you to the subject, what aperture are you shooting at, and what millimeter are you shooting at, and it'll tell you how wide your focal plane is. So what you can expect to have in focus. So another good friend of mine, Kelly Elmer, who's he's been my sidekick for a lot of the adventures that I go on and the overnight trips and stuff, and we shoot quite a bit together too. And he has gone out and done. He'll take his rangefinder. He takes his 400 millimeter. He ranges how far he is, and he tries to get, okay, here's how far I am for this 400 millimeter to have the elk in full frame. I got that
Really?
body and antlers and everything. And then he does the calculation with the photo pills, and he knows that, hey, where can I be at? How far away from the elk do I need to be to get everything on that elk in focus? And what does my aperture need to be? So shooting wide open at 400 millimeters at 2.8, if you're 60 yards away, I don't know what the exact focal plane is, but it's big enough that you can get the entire animal in focus. So, and this is the kind of things that the hardcore guys are doing, right? They're
Right.
constantly trying to, how do I up my game? How do I make sure I know everything I need to know about a scenario so I can just, on the fly, make adjustments and get the shot that I'm looking for. And I think that's kind of what separates the newer folks from the folks that have been doing it for a long time. But
That's
sorry,
super
that was a
cool.
rabbit hole.
No, that's all right. I'm enjoying this, man. Like I said, it's for my own greed. So, uh-oh. Lost you there for a second. Are you still there, Jason?
Yep, yep.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, I just lost your camera for a second. I think we're all good though.
Gotcha. Good.
No, that's awesome. So, are you? I know you've shot on Nikon for a number of years, haven't you? Are you still?
Yep. Yeah, so I
You've gone
started
down
with
that road with the
Nikon.
mirrorless, or?
Yeah, I started with Nikon, and I loved my gear. I had the D850 with the 500 millimeter prime, and it was just a dream combination. And it was waiting and waiting and waiting as the Sony and then the new Canon came out, and I was just, I was ready to, kind of just keep up with technology, right? And so I tried the Sony for a little bit and wasn't happy at the time. I was shooting the A7R4 with a 200 to 600, and that was never a good combination. And so I struggled with that, and I struggled with the color schemes and some of that stuff, and I just decided to not go that route. And then right after that, shortly, the Canon R5 came out, and they had that 1 to 500 lens that came out with it, and I picked that up and still had my Nikon gear, and started shooting that R5, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible. This thing is insane. I liked the files, I liked the colors, I liked what I was getting, and it was at the time it was like this is a reasonable, switch. I could make this switch and be good. So I started to sell my gear and made the switch, and literally after I bought a new 600 millimeter prime for the Canon R5, and I think like a couple months later they announced the Z9, and I was just like,
Mm.
of course you guys did. And anyways,
Right.
at the time, if they would have come out with the Z9 a year earlier, I probably would still be shooting Nikon. But one thing I'll say is anymore now, I think if you're shooting Sony, if you're shooting Canon, you're definitely gonna be fine. Even with the Nikon stuff, I think they've come a long way, but they're having some challenges. They're having some quality issues with some of their cameras, and they're having some issues with their software and that. They're having a hard time getting product to the customers. Like if you want that new 400 millimeter 1.4 TC built in that they've just come out with, most guys are on a waiting list, and if you're not on a waiting list now, you won't even be able to pretend to buy that lens for another couple years. So it's some of those things have made me not regret the switch, and so I'm definitely all in on Canon now, and been shooting the R5 for a couple years. So
Nice. Yeah. No, I haven't made the jump to mirrorless yet. I'm still just. I mean, I'm shooting on a. Oh, I have a couple cameras. I have a D750 and then the 850 as well. So
yeah,
really like both of those, and then I got
I'll,
incredible glass for it. So it's like I just don't do it
yeah.
enough for me to make the jump to mirrorless. But I was wondering. I'm glad that you told me that because I definitely wanted to go down the Nikon mirrorless road. But everybody I know, all my photographer buddies are either shooting Sony or Canon. So
Yeah, it's just sad too because Nikon still
yeah.
has really good glass, and they've got a history of really good products, and it's hard for me. I mean, I'm such a Nikon fan. But yeah, I think if you were gonna make the switch to mirrorless, I would highly recommend renting one and renting a Z9 and shooting it, with the adapter, and see if it's something you're really, gonna want to do. And if you don't, I mean, you could go mirrorless and go Canon and Sony, and you'll be fine. But like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard because you're invested in all that glass, and that's hard. It's a lot of commitment. You're not going to sell that stuff and make a ton of money because the
Right.
new technology is mirrorless. So you're selling, DSLR style equipment. It's still a market for it for sure, but you're not going to get near what you could, if things were still in the DSLR world. So
And
I don't know. It's
from your experience, shooting those old DSLR lenses on a mirrorless camera, is the speed and everything still? I mean, do they have that pretty dialed in with some of those adapters and stuff?
Yeah. So if you go Sony, right, you just don't have to worry about it all. Their stuff's been
Right.
mirrorless forever. But on the Canon stuff, it's been great. I don't know. I've heard some issues with the Nikon stuff, but I honestly don't know. I've never done it. But my buddy Harlan, he shoots a lot of EF glass on his R5 bodies, and he shoots them
Okay.
adapted, and he loves it. Never had a problem. So
Yeah, I'm curious to find out, but that's a good. That's a good approach, I think, is to do their old rent and then take it out shooting for a weekend or something. Figure it
Yeah,
out.
absolutely.
Kind of a crazy moment a couple weeks ago where I got this urge to buy a Fujifilm point and shoot, and it was an impulse buy. And I
Hmm.
got the I don't know, X100Z or X100V or something like that. But that's an amazing little mirrorless camera just for doing portraits and stuff here in the podcast studio and all that. Have you shot on one of those?
No, I haven't. I haven't shot much with the like the Micro Four Thirds equipment or
Yeah,
the like
it's
the
a fixed
Olympus.
lens. It's pretty
Right.
boring for like as far as I definitely would much rather pick up my Nikon body and then go shoot that with all the settings and buttons and knobs and stuff. It's a little bit different, but it's a good little point and shoot.
I think there's a place for a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'm when you're going on vacation, for example, do you really want to be hauling around a DSLR and a 74 to 2 or 24 to 70 lens? I
No,
mean,
it's
it's
like a whole
it's a
Pelican
lot of
case
weight.
full of yeah
Right. Right.
stuff,
So
right?
yeah, I mean, depending on what you're going on vacation to do, right? But I mean, for me, there's a place for those types of cameras and that still for sure. So
So when do you actually take off to Norway?
I leave like the first part of May, so it's
Okay,
coming up here
so
pretty
that's coming
quick.
up
Yeah.
pretty close here. What is
Yeah.
what is kind of the process? I mean, do you guys you fly into Oslo and then are there polar bears close to there, or is that how far do you have to go to get out to that? Is it like a boat ride or something, or
Yeah, so what we do is you and a lot of people want to go do this trip because it's just to see the landscape and see the ocean and see the ice and see the critters and stuff too without even taking a camera. But what you do is you fly into Oslo, Norway, and then from there I think it's like a 3 or 4 hour flight north of there to the island of Svalbard. And Svalbard's a pretty large island up there in the Arctic Ocean. And from there, you get on an icebreaker boat, and we live on that boat for 7 days out in the Arctic Ocean with the sea ice. And we're looking for polar bears and walruses and whatever, all the critters, Arctic fox, whatever.
so cool?
And when you see something, I guess you go and get in the zodiacs and cruise, up to photograph whatever the situation is. And so it's light a lot, most of the day that time of year, and you could be, shooting anything at pretty much any time of day. So it's going to be quite the experience for sure, living on the icebreaker and just the whole process of getting there and seeing the country and seeing the critters, and I'm super excited for it.
Now, is there a crazy gear list that comes along like that's provided by the guide or something? Like you need to have X, Y, and Z to make this. I mean, I'm sure you're gonna have some winter gear and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all stuff I pretty much already have. I mean, they do give you a list, but as far as keeping our camera gear realistic and that as well, and how to keep it dry, when you're in the zodiacs and stuff, there's some wet bags and some things that they recommend, and so yeah, there's a little bit of that for sure. But for other than that, it's really just how am I going to get it there, trying to keep my weights down and stuff, and then making sure I've got layers to wear so I keep myself warm. I think temperature wise, that time of year, you're in the 20s to 30s Fahrenheit. And that seems like it's not that big of a deal. But
That's
when
not
you're
too
on the
bad then.
ocean, right? When you're on the ocean, though, that's a different
It's a
ball
little
game,
bit
right? It's
different,
still
right?
still cold, right? So, and you're standing there. You're not doing a lot of walking and moving. You're on a zodiac or you're on the ice, and so you can be quite a bit colder. But yeah, so just going prepared, right? Take all the right gear, take the right clothing, and it should be amazing. So.
Yeah. Have you ever had any catastrophic losses to camera gear and stuff being out in the field? I mean, has there ever been any heartbreaking moments? Do you have backup gear in a situation like that? Because I could imagine. I know how expensive it is to get a cheeseburger in Oslo, so I can't imagine. I could imagine that this trip is a pretty dime.
Yeah, it's not cheap for sure, and it's one of those you definitely want to have all the right gear, backup gear too. I had one experience when I was shooting Nikon where I dropped my D850, or actually it was my D810
Oh,
with my 2 to 500 lens on it, and it busted the lens off the camera, and it basically ruined the lens, and the body had to have some repairs on it too. But I learned from that, and now I mean, I'll have two R5 bodies with me. I'll have my 600 millimeter with the 1.4. I'll have a 100 to 500 lens. I'll have a landscape lens. And so, the chances of things going wrong with both cameras or all my lenses is pretty slim. So, I
Right.
should be good. I've never had a problem other than that. And I've learned that it's really smart with the amount of money I have in my camera gear. I carry insurance now as well. So,
Yeah, the inland marine insurance is the shit, man. It's awesome.
hmm
We have it up on all the podcast gear and the photography gear, and it's come into play a couple times.
yeah, yeah, it's critical. I
Even with
mean,
just an airline losing something,
absolutely. And that's the cool thing is that it covers all that. It covers damage for whatever reason. It covers theft. It covers loss. It covers all of it. So, pretty important to have.
Out of all the stuff that you've shot and some of the trips that you've been on, is there one that just stands out? Or I mean, they're all special, I'm sure, but is there one that's like, God, I can't wait to go do that again, or something along those lines, Jason?
I'd say for me, I mean, I love the North American big game stuff. My favorites are mule deer, elk, sheep. Have become a real big favorite of mine. Bighorn sheep, and
You have some incredible sheep photos.
oh, thank you, man, thank you. Yeah, and waterfowl's a very big passion of mine. I've got a lot of waterfowl birds that check off my list and places I want to go to photograph them. But I think the one that really stands out the most, and it's probably because it's the most recent. I've already mentioned it a little bit. Is Africa. Africa is just incredible. Every time you go there, you're just going to have different experiences, and there's so many opportunities to photograph things over there, which is just hard to beat. Here you might go out in the field and you got the first couple hours in the day and the last couple hours of the evening, and pretty much you're done otherwise. And over there, you're shooting things all day long, every day. It's
Wow.
hard to beat that way. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most. Other than these, like this Oslo trip, obviously is a big one. But yeah, getting back to Africa at some point here soon, and then there's other places too. And next year we're going to Costa Rica for a few days and gonna try to take the wives with us and do some combinations, some vacationing slash photography, which we don't do a lot, but once in a while it works. I mean, I took my wife and my son actually on the Africa trip, and that worked out really well because they loved every minute of it, and I was able to take photos while we're having those experiences together. And my wife's already asking about going back to Africa because she loved all the animals, so.
That's good. Yeah, no, it's a special spot. Where were you at in Africa specifically? Is it?
We were South Africa, flew into Johannesburg, and we spent most of our time in and around Kruger National Park. So
Yeah, it's awesome there. I'm fortunate that I got to spend some time there. Cape Town's amazing too, to go out and
yeah,
shoot, birds and fish and all kinds of different stuff. It's pretty wild. If you got a few minutes before we jump off here, I guess let's dive a little bit more into the podcast. What do you guys got coming up with that, and what can people expect for guests coming up?
yeah. So we I don't know if we have any of the. I mean, we're just more guests, more of the same, I guess. Really, I don't know if we have any like crazy. We're kind of caught up right now, which is not always a good thing, right? I mean, you as a podcast host, you want to try to have some in the kitty, so to speak, so you're not scrambling. But we're at a situation right now where we're kind of caught up. So there's not a lot of guests that have been on the schedule yet. We're working on that. But we'll have some really cool guests, more guests coming up. We'll have some repeat guests, I'm sure, like Doug Gardner. And, we just released and recently just had a couple podcasts, one with Doug Gardner, where he talked about the bear footage that he got for Wild America. Or America in the Wild. I can't remember which series it was, but it's incredible. It's Cypress bears where they're in the swamp and they actually den in the cypress trees, the old cypress trees. And he got the first ever documented footage of the bear taking the cubs from the tree to the bank and how that happens. And it was the whole story behind how that was captured and what it took is just incredible. That's a really good episode to go listen to. We just talked to Ben Masters, who does Fin and Fur, productions, and he's famous for movies like
He
Unbranded
did
and
some wild horse stuff, right?
yep, Unbranded was the one that he was did there, and He's got a ton of other movies that he's done, and he's just a really solid dude and really fun to listen to, and tells some great stories as well. So we try to have some like real legitimate folks that are professionals in the industry and that can actually tell good stories and share secrets, quote unquote, with us about how they're approaching life and their business. But yeah, just more of that and more of us, the guys, chatting and bantering back and forth and harassing each other and catching up on what we've been up to and out in the field doing and that. So yeah, it should be fun. Should be fun.
Do you have a trip planned to Colorado coming up at all, Jason, anytime soon?
Not anytime soon. With this vacation restrictions I've got with this like 2 week trip to Oslo, it ends up being a 2 week trip, on the front end and back end travel and getting there and everything, and we're spending a couple days in Oslo, shooting, or in Svalbard shooting Arctic foxes and some stuff too. So I don't have any plans right now. Sometimes I try to get out there in July for velvet bulls and stuff. I probably will skip that this year just because of limitations on time. But I'll probably be back that way for sure. When it kind of starts getting October, November time frame, and the deer start calling my name. My neck will start to swell up, and I'll start getting a little ruddy myself. And I
Yeah.
gotta go answer the call. So
Yeah, I hardly ever get out of Evergreen, but a bucket list for me, and I don't know why I haven't done this, is to get over, and I'm really kicking myself in the ass for not getting over and shooting Brutus, like, because some of the photos that you have of him are just stunning.
yeah,
Was he the bull that you have kind of like the all black background and it's just those long tines? Is that same bull?
yeah, that was him. Yeah, that I have a lot of history with that bull. I mean, I was fortunate enough to shoot him. I think was 7 years ago, and at that time, literally the only people photographing that bull was myself, Harlan Cooper, and a guy named John De Palma, who's a good friend of mine and another great photographer. But we had him to ourselves for well, all of September basically back then. Um, but you know how social media is and that, and it didn't stay a secret, very long. And the next year there was 15 or so folks. The next year there was 40 or so folks. The next year there was 100 folks. And now it's just gotten out of control. I mean, Rocky Mountain National Park has become so well known, and partly because of that bull, but partly because of just it's a great place to visit. I don't blame anybody for wanting to go over there and photograph at all. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible. Um, but I would recommend it to anybody, even if it's just to go. I mean, a lot of the locals, a lot of the locals in Denver, they go up there in the weekends and on the weeknights and set up their chairs around the meadow in Moraine there and just witness the rut. So I mean, it's quite
Yeah,
the
it's insane.
spectacle. It is. It is.
We've had such an influx in people, and that was another reason kind of starting the podcast, which kind of leads me to my next thing is, with as much time as you spend in the outdoors, and I like to ask people from all kinds of different walks of life, whether they're a professional rock climber, professional photographer, or whatever. What are some things that you notice that people could just be doing better? I mean, we already talked about Torons of Yellowstone, and these people running around with cell phones, running right up to animals and not kind of giving them a little bit of space.
Right.
Outside of that, what are some other things that you notice that just kind of gets under your skin, or something that maybe because I think what has happened, and I've brought this up multiple times on the podcast, is that we've had so many people leave an inner city situation, and this is new and exciting, and they move into a mountain community, or maybe they're living in Denver and are just visiting a mountain community. And this is across the Rocky Mountain region and probably all over the world. I think the pandemic pushed people into some of these spots,
Right.
um, and kind of made people realize, like, hey, I can work remote now. I could live anywhere I want. Why wouldn't I live in this beautiful spot? But I
Right.
don't think, me growing up here and having some influences, or some really good influences, and grandfathers and uncles and stuff like that taught me to be a steward of the land, and take care of it. And there's nobody cleaning up after you, and you should clean up kind of after other people.
Right.
Um, it was one of the catalysts for starting this podcast. So I like to ask people that have spent a ton of time outside, what are some of the most common things that you're kind of seeing that people could just be doing better? And I think, like I said, I don't think people are doing stuff on purpose. I think they just don't know better, right?
Right. I would agree with that for the most part. I think most people want to do the right thing and they just don't know better. But I also think like anybody that's just drops their gum wrapper or a soda can on the ground when they're up there in the mountains is that's just ignorance. I mean,
Yeah.
flat out stupidity and ignorance, and they're doing it on purpose, and that's just laziness. I'm like you. I was always taught to when I see garbage, pick it up, even if it's not mine. You know, when we went camping, my dad would always make us leave the campground better than we found it. You know, it just make sure we went around,
Yes.
picked up all the garbage, all that stuff. You know, and so I oftentimes pick up trash when I'm out in the mountains and the parks and stuff doing my thing, and I just think you know, if people were just better about that stuff, but I think a lot of people just have really crappy attitudes about all that stuff, and they just some of it comes from ignorance, but some of it just comes from, you know, just who they are. I think you know, and they weren't taught that way. You know,
Yeah.
in all fairness, but I think from that standpoint, like visitors could do a better job of knowing the rules and knowing, let's back to the Darwinism thing, being smart and knowing that you need to give these animals their space. And if they read any of the packet at all, they'd understand that they're not supposed to be within any closer than 25 yards of the animals, and they should respect that and give them their space. All of us like to have those close
Which is
encounters,
pretty
and I've
damn
had
close,
some.
dude.
It really is. It's insanely close when you think about it, and that's why
Yeah.
most of us with our big cameras, we do that for a reason. Those lenses give us that space, and we can have those encounters and those get those images without interfering with their with what they're doing, and changing their behavior. So I think that, and I think a lot of it too is like respecting the situation. A lot of photographers, I think that they get excited and they get caught up in the moment, and then it ends up being an all-out brawl, and you'll see a group of photographers just mauling an animal, and I'll be lying if I said I wasn't ever part of that before. I have been before, there's no
Hmm.
question, but I think as I've maybe I don't know what you want to call it, matured, learned, whatever. I think I find myself wanting to avoid those situations more than be a part of them, and I find myself wanting to be less and less a part of those things and go find my own stuff to photograph. And I'm starting to also be more of a. It doesn't have to be the biggest bull or the biggest buck on the mountain. It can be just a nice bull or a nice buck, and I can still get some really good images and have that critter to myself, maybe, or with a couple of buddies, and not have everybody in the on social media have the exact same animal and all the exact same poses. So that's kind of gotten discouraging for me over the last few years. Is just like these animals, they get found, they people know where they're at, and then you've got every single time I open my Instagram feed, I'm seeing that freaking same buck or that freaking same bull from 800 different photographers, and
Yeah.
for which is there's
It
two
turns
sides.
into
It's
a
double-edged sword,
Pavarotti
right?
type situation, right?
Right, it does, and there's pluses and minuses. I get it. It's awesome that so many people want to be out doing it, but at the same time, we all have to be careful because you hear people talk about loving our our wild places to death, and the sad reality is if we keep it up, they're going to start shutting places down more and more, and they'll start limiting access more and more, and all these people that want to access those and have those experiences will just be limited to be able to do it, and you'll have to know about the reservation systems, and you have to pay extra money, and they're doing all those things, supposedly to try to control the amount of impact to the
Hmm.
animals into the parks. So I think that's some of the things I think I see when I think about social media. I get pretty discouraged about just there's some folks out there that are just they're not telling true stories. They're being phony. They're creating a persona. They're doing things that they're leading people to believe that are real, that aren't real. And anybody that knows. But for the most part, the people that don't know, they think this person's amazing, and they're giving them all these credit and kudos and stuff. And some of that stuff drives me insane. I just keep my mouth shut and do my thing and whatever. Maybe I'm the dummy because I'm not willing to do that, and I'll never be that person. But I just don't. I don't
Well,
like
that's
that.
why
I
you're
think
sitting
that's
here with me right now, too, Jason. I don't want anything to do with those assholes, basically,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then
so,
social media just
so I
drives that
appreciate it.
behavior. But yeah, no, I appreciate that too, brother. I really do. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. There's probably a lot of things that kind of bug me. I'm getting
Yeah.
old, right? I'm getting old and crotchety, so
Right. Me too, bro. But I feel you 100%. Like, there's nothing more special than just having you as much as I love having my buddies there and stuff too, but it's like just having a moment with those animals, and it's just you and your camera and that, big bull or buck or bear or whatever. It's pretty special.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love what you said. I'm
I
going to
feel
keep
like there's
doing
enough
more and
out
more
there
of
for
it.
everybody too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said earlier, just and I'm going to do more and more of it, is just the whole idea of just to put the camera down once in a while and just, be there and really take it in. I don't
Yes.
want to you don't want to live life behind your viewfinder. That's something that's really important to remember. Don't live your entire life behind your viewfinder, because it's a completely different world when you step back and look at the whole picture.
Well, I think that applies to cell phones too. It's like we brought that up. We actually just brought it up, I think, in the last podcast we put out with my buddy Mark Montoya. We're just talking about, actually being in the moment. He's a UFC fighter coach, and there's, a ton of stuff going on, and he could be all over social and have this huge social following, but it's more about like what he's doing, staying focused, staying sharp, staying in the moment, enjoying the moment,
Right.
and I think a lot of people are just caught up, even when you go to your kid's soccer game or whatever, it's like, oh God, I got to get this goal or whatever, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that we could all do it a little bit. It's not just even photographers, so
Right.
I think it applies to everybody. Well, Jason, man, I really appreciate your time. Please let me know when you're coming back to Colorado. If you can make it out here in September, I'd love to show you around my neighborhood, and I know you'd have a good time shooting some of the bulls around here.
Yeah.
As long as you don't tell all your friends or put it on the podcast, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, we're real careful about that. We don't put
man,
locations on the podcast.
Yeah. No, it's all good. No, I've already blown it up. I already get a bunch of hate around here just for the little things that I say, so. But yeah, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for conservation and everything. I think that that's a huge part too that's overlooked. I think, these wildlife photographers being ethical and sharing those ethical moments and, portraying a little bit of the journey, not just so much the image, and maybe an experience that you've had with an animal. I think that applies to the hunting world too. I think there's a big change coming in a lot of that. And I see a lot of really good people doing stuff like that and sharing their moments and experiences more rather than just a grip and grin photo or just a photo of an awesome bull, So I think
Right.
that kind of sheds a light a little bit more on conservation, why things need to be around, and, maybe why people will listen to scientists and biologists more than just politicians, So that's
Nice.
what
I like how you fit that
Yeah.
in. That was good.
Yeah. Keyhole it in there.
Yep.
All right, Jason. Have a good night, brother. I really appreciate you. And
Thanks, Bobby.
I'll catch you the next time you're out this way.
Absolutely. Take
right.
care, man.
Thanks for listening to the Mountainside Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, please take a moment, follow, like, subscribe, or rate on whatever platform you catch the Mountainside Podcast at. Also, if you'd like some more information on upcoming episodes, safety tips, access to all of our affiliates, and all the badass discounts that we get here at the Mountainside Podcast, check out themountainsidepodcast.com.